coming to my guidance to planning a virtual celebration of our 80th birthdays. And I'm going to start by showing you some of the things that I prepared in advance and put in the freezer. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Not knowing what days would be good baking days here. And after I've done that, I'm going to start to show you how to do some of these things. I've lost my thread of thought, but let me start by showing you some easy and quick preparations for celebration in time of COVID, because sometimes we even can't get to the bakery and certainly can't get all the supplies we need to bake things from scratch. Okay, so this, my assistant is going to show you the things. This is a monkey bread, which would be a nice treat for those of you who will be joining us for brunch. And behind it is a cake that I will show you how to make, made out of Sara Lee pound cake and then decorated to look festive. And some little chocolate pilots, some pinwheel cookies, which I will not demonstrate because they're a little complicated. 6 different ways to decorate a cupcake, and I will go over those with you. What I'm calling Barnard Bears, although one of them is a little smushy, so that's somebody who didn't graduate properly. And in the back, those are bagels made according to a Weight Watchers recipe, which is very low calorie and extremely easy to make and delicious, but it doesn't taste like a bagel. And in the back, little pumpkin pilots, which I have to tell you about a little bit, because you can see there's a little gap between the pumpkin pie and the crust, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but they don't freeze well. And finally, a fruit tart made with the same crust as the pumpkin pilots were made. Okay, down to business. And again, before I start, I just want to recommend a few items that even if you are baking from home and using cake mixes and using pre-measured ingredients, one of the things that is very helpful is a kitchen scale. And there were many places where I cut the recipe in half so that I could make variations on it. Without a kitchen scale, I couldn't have done it. And along with a kitchen scale, parchment paper. It's absolutely essential for cleanup and for ease of work. And for checking whether something is done, a really good grade thermometer. Oven thermometer, hand thermometer, not an oven thermometer, but a kitchen thermometer. Okay, so I will start now with the first demonstration, and that is making monkey bread. But I have to get to my refrigerator for a second because I forgot to take the stuff out. Sorry, it was not in its accustomed place. To make monkey bread, you have to start with a can of Pillsbury Grands flaky layered biscuits. My husband says I need a disclaimer that I don't work for Pillsbury. As a matter of fact, in doing some of these quick and easy things, I did start using Pillsbury mixes and didn't like them. Again, a disclaimer. And found that the Betty Crocker mix was much better. Okay, the hardest thing about making this is opening it. But that seemed to work. Take out biscuits. And you have to cut each one into 4 pieces. It's not rocket science. And Jerry, did you put up the? No, I know you put up the stove, but melt the butter. My assistant over there, we rehearsed it, but not perfectly. Which reminds me, if you haven't started watching it, there's a really good series on Apple TV. It's on Apple, right? Yeah. Called The Morning Show. And it's about, part of it is about the Me Too movement, and part of it is about women asserting themselves into roles of leadership. Okay, almost done. Okay, after it's all cut into 4 pieces, then you need to, oops. And I'm actually making a half recipe here because the recipe book, which I will mail to you if you wish it, or Joan will. I made a half recipe because I wanted to make half of it beforehand to show you what it looks like finished, in case we don't get it finished in time. You put some cinnamon and sugar in a plastic bag, add the biscuits. Close up the bag, because if you don't, your whole kitchen will be full of cinnamon and sugar. And just shake it around until everybody is nicely coated with the cinnamon and sugar. Then comes a hot now. Then you take it and you put each little piece. I'm using a small size tube pan, and you want to use a tube pan so that it bakes evenly all the way through. Use a plain pan, the middle will stay raw while the outside cooks. And you put in a layer on the bottom, like that. Then add some, if you want to, and this is optional, walnuts and raisins. And I always think you can't have enough nuts and enough raisins. Is it melting yet? Then the second layer, maybe a little sprinkler of cinnamon sugar if some places look bare. The rest of the nuts and raisins. Okay, and this is the only slightly tricky part, although Jerry has stirred it around, is that when you melt the butter and the brown sugar, they separate. And in order to have this work, you've got to get them well blended together. And so it takes a little bit of mixing. Until all of the butter is absorbed by the brown sugar. And after that, which is now, oops, nope, not quite. You'll see a little ring of butter around the edge of the pot. And you should really melt the butter and the brown sugar at a fairly low temperature. Okay, now it's all blended in. You just pour it over. It'll spread out as the thing bakes. And I need that pan. Show up. And then you put it in a pan to bake, lined with parchment in case it leaks or something like that. And you stick it in the oven for 35 to 40 minutes until it's brown, or if you have an oven thermometer, until it registers about 200 degrees. Number one, that's done. And when you're all finished, and it should be done before we're finished, it will look like this. And then to eat it, you just pull off a piece. You don't need a knife or a fork to serve it. And I'm not going to eat it now because I've been licking my fingers all day. Okay, that's number one. The next thing is the next thing is a modification of a recipe that I usually make from scratch for making chocolate almond bars. And in the recipe book that I sent you, you'll find a recipe for making, oops, oh, I'm just like Julia Child. Oops is the most frequent word you would hear in this kitchen when I'm being polite. This is the, again, this is a commercial. This is the base that I've been using. It's Betty Crocker sugar cookie base, and it's got the recipes on the back, although I've included in the recipe book that I prepared for you. This is really an all-purpose cookie base that you can make everything that I have made, except for the stuff that's made with cake. I mixed it up a little bit just before I spoke to you, and you take little balls of the dough and put it into your pan. And we're going to press it in. Most of you probably don't have this half pan, but the recipe calls for a 13 by 9 inch pan, which is your standard Pyrex pan. But as I said, I've made half recipes so I could demonstrate more things. And one of the reasons that you need to use a scale in cutting this in half is that the recipe calls for 1 egg. And how do you make a half an egg? Well, you can do one of two things. You can either just use the yolk or just use the white. And that might give you a different texture. Or you could weigh it. And a large egg weighs 50 grams by, I guess, USDA standards. And so you beat it up and cut it in half. Put 25 grams in each half package. The scale that I use and that I found after trying several, because I will do that. I'll use one and then suddenly realize it's not worthwhile and it goes to Goodwill or something. Doesn't suit my purposes, but about 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I bought the OXO kitchen scale, and that's really outstanding. It weighs in both ounces and grams, and you will find if you start using the scale that it's much easier to use grams because the division is simpler. And in addition, most modern from scratch recipes are now being written by weight rather than just cups. They'll include the weight in it. And what happens when you measure your ingredients by weight, you end up having 1 bowl to wash instead of 4 cups on a bowl. And so it ends up being a big time saver. Because the least fun about baking is, of course, cleaning up. Even if you have somebody who's a sous chef who will help you because he likes cookies. But he doesn't know half the mess that I make because I'm a messy person. So sometimes I've cleaned up before he even sees what the kitchen looks like, which is quite often looks like it's been attacked by Attila the Hun. Okay. So I have filled this up, trying to get it all the way to the edge of the, and I will say that one thing that's a little bit different about using this cookie recipe is that while it looks like it's very thinly put into this dish, there must be, this gets to be a little bit thicker than an ordinary pâté brisé, but it's still good because it gets very crispy. Okay, this is now going to go in the oven for about 20 minutes till it's golden brown, and then I'll show you the next step. Gerald, you said you would come and get? In 20 minutes. You can always zap them. He's melting chocolate chips on my, I have a warming zone on my range. And if it, because that's the easiest way to do it without having them burn or seize. Microwaving chocolate chips can be tricky. Okay. Next. And the next will probably be a little bit slower because I forgot to take out the puff paste. We'll see if we can't convince it to behave. I know what I'll do. We'll switch gears a little bit. I'm just going to take one of, this is prepared puff paste. You really need to be a master baker to make puff paste from scratch. And this Pepperidge Farm is very acceptable. For those of you who live near some of the more gourmet supermarkets, you can get an all butter puff paste, which would be even better. But when we had Fairway was here in Rockland County, I could get that kind, but no longer. So I'm stuck with the supermarket brand, which for the most part is acceptable. And I haven't, although I've baked many, many, many things, I have not tried to make puff paste. So while we're waiting for that to come to a reasonable temperature, I'll show you the next thing. One of the recipes that I've divided my recipe book into 3 sections. One has brunch items, one has savory items, and one will be the sweets, which is most of them. And that's because some of us who are coming to the birthday party will be joining from the West Coast, where it will be brunch time at 2 o'clock or lunchtime. And some of us will be joining from Europe or Israel or other sections where it will be cocktail time or evening snack. So I've included some savory dishes as well as brunch dishes, as well as sweet ones. And this one is a basil tort, which is made with pignolia nuts or pine nuts, diced sun-dried tomatoes, pesto, and a mixture of cream cheese and goat cheese. And it's very festive and very pretty and very easy to make. And the only trick is getting it out. And that's the only trick. And the way to overcome that is to line your bowl. Hopefully you have a glass bowl so you can see what's coming in, with saran wrap, or I should say cling wrap or plastic wrap, depending on where you're living. You line it, and then you have to have this very cold when you try to take it out. Put it on top, turn it in the right direction, and you move the bowl, or you scream for help. Nope, got it. See, the bowl's all clean, except my sous chef will make it cleaner. Center it on the plate and take the plastic wrap off. Serve it with crackers, and it's really good if you like cheese. If you don't like cheese, well, you're out of luck. Okay, and now for the baked brie. This is also a simple thing. You know what? I need a little flour wrap. Just a little bit. I bought, this is not a very fancy brie. This is a rather inexpensive one, but it works for this dish. And it's this. Just a spoonful. Yeah. Okay. And this, according to one recipe, and I've never done this, done it this way, you just remove the rind a little bit. You can see it's not a terribly creamy brie, but for the purposes it'll work. Anything else I forgot? I need a baking pan for this. So I the smaller, one of the smaller ones downstairs, or that one that's over there with. Okay, and then you could take a vegetable peeler and just go around the side and get rid of most of it. Okay, and since it's such a small brie, for the purposes, I'm going to leave the bottom rind on. I know this is the puff paste, which should be it is just right now. Just going to put a little flour on it and roll it out to get rid of the seam folds. Then you put the brie in the center of the square that you rolled, and roughly cut a circle around the brie. Actually, just cutting off the corners. And then you could save that and turn that into cookies later. I'm going to put a little cranberry sauce on top, whole berry cranberry sauce. You can make it from scratch. But I just bought the whole berry cranberry sauce. You put it on top. Or you can use any jam, jelly, marmalade that you prefer. Added some onion to this, it would be nice also. Okay, can you see that? Yeah. And then you just take the circle that you made and fold it up around the brie. Could have cut that a little smaller. So a little bit of the cranberry still pokes out. Again, lining my pan with parchment because it beats cleaning it. This is what it looks like. I'm going to put it in. And when it's baked, you could glaze it with a little egg or a little heavy cream. I'm going to do the heavy cream, which will make it brown nicely. It won't be as shiny. But it's faster than beating up an egg. Make sure those little folds are well sealed. In the end, I will sprinkle some pistachio nuts on it before I serve it. Ta-da! You want to put that one in? Okay. Okay. Just checking the time. The other thing that's handy to have when you're cooking is one of these scrapers, because you can get stuff out of your way so you can continue. Okay. The next thing on my list is what I've called Barnard Bears. And this is made from the same cookie mix, following the directions for the drop cookie. The cookies are then iced with vanilla. Jared, can you bring over those vanilla cookies? Iced with vanilla, canned icing. And the interesting thing is, I found out that you can take canned icing, and I'll show you about this in a few minutes, show you how to do this in a few minutes, and pour it on to a cookie, in which case you get a much smoother surface to work with. This side didn't quite zap long enough, but we're still going to be able to make a Barnard Bear. I'm using, again, this is Betty Crocker decorating icing, and it comes with a bunch of little tips. No, there should be more. Yeah, that one. Little tips, and you just screw it on when we're ready to ice the cookie. We made the ears out of mini marshmallows, which you squish really flat so it looks ear-shaped, or bear ear-shaped, and just stick. Whoops. See, there comes whoops again. I'm being polite. I just read a book called The Dictionary of Lost Words. That's the ears, which is about the less than polite words our society uses. And the history of the Oxford English Dictionary and why they excluded or how they came to exclude certain salty words, let's put it that way. And it's really a very, very, very interesting book. And as my children and grandchildren will tell you, I don't hesitate to use them. So I'm being very polite and saying whoops. My husband doesn't know I use those words. Okay, so now we have 4 ears on. And when you want to place the face, and in the cookbook, I have sent you a little schematic on how to do it. But even if you are a practiced artist like Elizabeth, it's a good idea to take a toothpick and place where you want to put the eyes and the nose before you try to use the icing to do it. And a bear actually has eyes that are very low in its head and close to its nose. This one didn't get quite enough icing on it. Okay, having put a schematic in, you see there are little holes made by the toothpick. I found that this icing, when it first starts, is a little bit loose. So I tested some on a piece of paper down there. 1, 2 eyes, the nose, and the mouth. It looks like I put that nose in upside down. That one didn't come out so beautifully, but I'll show it to you anyway. 2 eyes, a nose, which is a V, and 2 C's for the mouth. Two eyes, so just 2 squishes. And upside down, upside right, a V for the nose. And then 2 C's for the mouth. C's on their side. And again, it's the same recipe as the one I just made for the chocolate almond bars. That's the Barnard Bears. I'll add them to my plate over there. So there we go. Got my hand out of the way. Okay. The ones where the icing really was soft and melty really worked better. Okay, we have a dozen Barnard Bears there. Maybe we should have made 80. Okay, despite having put something to wipe my hands with, I went over to the sink. So much for planning ahead. Okay. The next one is probably the trickiest thing that I'm going to show you. And that's how to make a rose for cake decoration, which is a traditional decoration We have one here out of, if I can hold it without it falling over, out of chocolate. Oops, I forgot, I want to do one thing first. Okay,
Mhm.
forgot one thing I had to do. And that show you a very easy way to make a festive cake. And then we'll go to the rose.
Okay.
That is to buy a pound cake, either a Sara Lee pound cake or a Entenmann's pound cake. If you buy the Entenmann's pound cake, which is frozen, you should, which is not frozen, you ought to put it in the freezer because it's much easier to work with a frozen cake than a room temperature one. In fact, the cupcakes that I'm going to show you how to ice in a few minutes are all frozen because it's easier to ice a cake if it's frozen than fresh. And this pound cake, we're going to cut into about 4 layers. And it's very easy with a good sharp knife if it's frozen. If it's fresh, you're going to get crumbs. Two layers, one more and we'll be set. It's like the old fence post math problem. You only have to cut it 3 times to get 4 layers. Okay, and the frosting I'm using for this is something that I don't know if any of you have watched the Great British Baking Show. It's one of my addictions. And one of the contestants was a woman named Nadja, who went on to have her own baking show and her own cooking show. The baking show is called Nadja Bakes. And this frosting recipe comes from her cookbook. And what it is, it's pure genius. It's powdered sugar, butter, and melted strawberry ice cream. And you could really use any kind of ice cream to accomplish the same thing. But I decided to try the strawberry because, well, the recipe actually has a very fancy cupcake recipe where you put in a vanilla flavored Oreo and then a strawberry and then fill it with cake batter and then put this icing on it. But I didn't think I'd be able to demonstrate all of that, so I did it this way. And this icing is just scrumptious. And I don't even like strawberry icing. Ice cream or icing. Anyway, you put icing between each layer. And that chocolate cake I just showed you, I did the same thing using a chocolate frosting. Pressing down slightly. Okay, now we have the thing reassembled with frosting between the layers. Back to my parchment. Reynolds is now making parchment in cut sheets. I don't know, I got this in Costco, but I imagine it's available in smaller packages in the supermarket, and it's really makes using parchment very, very simple. So we're going to put some on the top and the sides. When you ice a cake, I'm sure most of you know, you start on the top, always put lots on the top and then work your way down to the sides. I'm going to take out a spoon to make this a little bit easier. And during now that other stuff should be melted. The chocolate should be melted. And, oh, oops, big oops. And this, normally you'd have two ends of a cake, but I cut the cake in half so I could show you, try it out myself. I used to make this cake years ago when I was first married and hadn't gotten into the kind of baking that I do now. So it was bride friendly. I hadn't done it in so many years, I decided I had to experiment with it again. Let me turn it around, it'll be easier for you to see what's happening and me to control what's happening. This has a lot of frosting on it. When it has two ends, then it's easier to, it doesn't pick up any cake crumbs. Almost ready for decoration. And we could decorate it in any number of ways, but I think I'm going to follow her since her really needs very little in the way of added flavors. It sort of stands on its own. I'm just going to sprinkle some. Oops, I see it. See, now that's like having a mirror there. I can see where I missed. You could add cookie crumbs to the sides or nuts to the sides. I'm just going to put a little bit of this is, you can get dried strawberries in Trader Joe's. And which I did, and I'm just pulverized some, and I'm going to sprinkle it on top. And maybe a little bit on the sides. And that's really sufficient to make it festive without being too sweet, because the icing is a little bit sweet. Okay, that one's done. And again, I did not include a recipe for this. There is recipes for the frosting, but you'll see by the method that you just take a pound cake, cut it up, and put in whatever kind of frosting you like. As long as there's some left, don't add it. Okay. And then move that again. This can go here. And I will put this aside someplace to dry off a little bit. Yeah. Almond cookies are ready. It's baked. All right. Now this is the rest of the almond bars. If that chocolate hasn't melted, we'll. Test that with the thermometer. Let me put that right on. Around 200. Okay, this is the, I'll get another pair of gloves. Show you. All right. This is the almond cookie is baked when it's golden brown. It's a little bit darker than it's showing up on the television because of all the bright light. I need chocolate. I have melted 8 ounces of chocolate bits, and I'm going to add that to this freshly baked cookie. And when it's cool, you just you could use Nutella instead of melting chocolate bits, but Nutella will never firm up. So it will make it serving of it a little bit more complicated. So that's why these chocolate bits will firm up so that you can cut this into cookie bars. I've melted a little bit more chocolate than I need, but you really should always do that because it's at the last minute, you can't go back and melt more. And you can lick the bowl. And then after you put the chocolate bits on, you coat it with lightly toasted almonds. This is sliced almonds. Everything has been made from the same Betty Crocker sugar cookie mix. Okay, that's done. I'm going to put this aside to cool. Is there a, I need a rack. to put it on the rack. Yeah, rack. Okay. Got to be aware of the time, so we have a little time to talk. The last thing I'm going to demonstrate, and I'm not going to be able to do much in the way. Here's the other hand. All right, let me just get this off of here. And this is probably the trickiest thing I'm going to show you today is how to make a rose without having to pipe it. Because piping a rose is a skill and a half. And that is by making molded chocolate or molding chocolate or a fondant. I have some fondant here also, but this is a molded chocolate. And when you make it, it will, when you need to use it, it's very hard. And you have to work it in your hands till it's soft, which really doesn't take that long, but you have to work it around. Okay. When you make a small piece, and let's see, we're running out of space. I'm going to put this in the, well, I'll put it over. that basil loaf you should have ready to serve about an hour before you want to serve it, and let it stand at room temperature, because like all cheese, it tastes better when it's at room temperature. Okay, you roll this out fairly thin. Now, the problem with making molded chocolate nowadays is finding the right kind of melt. It used to be very readily available. If you use the Ghirardelli vanilla chocolate or white chocolate, it doesn't work. It's really very, very difficult to work with. White chocolate will seize, it'll separate, and you have to really fool around with it to get it to be of a consistency to be able to do what I'm going to do. Oh, it's here. Here. My little cutters. No, that's not the cutters. Hold on. All right, we'll use this. Since I can't find my box of cutters, I don't know what I did with them. You can use any bottle cap. All right, that's a small one. I want the big one. You can use any bottle cap to cut a circle. The sharper the bottle cap, the better off you are. I rolled out a little thin. And you need to cut 5 circles. What happened to the spatula? White spatula. All right, you take a piece of the scrap and roll it into a cylinder, which you be pointed at one end. I'll take a knife. I used it with the icing. Maybe it's all right, when you pick up one of the circles and you wrap it around the cylinder, letting a little of the edge fall over. Take a second circle, wrap it next to it, and you've got the second petal of the rose. A third circle, add it, roll the petal back. We've got 3 petals to the rose, and I rolled those a little thin, so I'm going to re-roll them. If it's too thin, they'll fall apart as when you try to cut them. But you just start over again. We could have a whole talk just on doing these things because they are tricky. And it works just as well with fondant as with the molding chocolate. And there's a recipe in the book that I've sent you for easy fondant made with marshmallow and powdered sugar. So we've made a little rose using these yellow melts. And the problem with these melts is that when you read the directions on the packages, I forgot what it's called, but I got them in Michael's. It says don't add liquid. And in order to make this molding chocolate, you need melting chocolate and corn syrup. So when I melted the corn syrup, when I melted these and added the corn syrup, it got very fatty. It caused the fat in the chocolate to separate. And so I took it out and kneaded it up anyway and left the fat in the little bowl I was mixing it in. But it's not quite as firm as when you use real chocolate. I used this is one I made when I first did it. It will firm up. So if it's a little bit slack when you start it, just leave it aside, put it in something that'll shape it and it'll firm up. When you use real chocolate, you do get a little more control. And I just knocked the ear off of another Barnard Bear to put on top of a cupcake, or you could use it for a baby. And this is one that I made out of the white chocolate, and it was very, very difficult to work with. But in the recipe book that I send you, will send to you, it does have a template for making these, which will be a little bit easier to follow. And if you can't follow it, you can call me. I'll put my phone number in there and I'll talk you through it. And finally, we're going to decorate some cupcakes or not. All right, I'll take two. Jerry, did you know it's chocolate yet? The poured chocolate.
Oh.
This is something I'll do real quickly just to show you how it works. Again, these, you get a can of, or a can of prepared frosting. And again, I'm using, in this case, I am using Pillsbury. And I keep my cupcakes and cakes in the freezer until I'm ready to frost them. No, it has to be completely liquid. I will take out a couple. This is a really quick way to frost. When you're using this method, you might have to repeat this pouring a couple of times, but you put the cupcakes on a nice rack. Let's get you out of the way. Let me see. All right, and then for decorations, I have this is poured frosting. You melt it in the microwave oven 15 seconds and then more or a little more. And then you just pour the frosting. I'm going to use a spoon on top of the cupcake or the cake. That's a little excessive. And you end up with a nice glossy frosting. And you let it sit. And sometimes if it runs off too much, you might have to put a second layer on. That's it. You can see it's running down the sides. But that can be on a cake, very attractive. All right, one more thing, and then we'll talk. Yeah, show them. There's one other decoration that I want to show you. I'm going to take these off of here. I want to show you quickly how to make this decoration, which is marshmallow. And this one is made simply using nonpareils. And I happen to have pointy ones, which makes it look more daisy-like, but you could use round ones just as well. And to make the marshmallow rose or flower, here you have to freeze the marshmallows, otherwise they're too hard to cut. Take a nice sharp knife, and I'm using my tomato knife for it because it's serrated, and cut it into 5 pieces, 5 slices. You really only get 4 out of 1 marshmallow. And take each circle that you cut and stretch it out to form a petal. And then we're going to dip it into sugar crystals, or I guess you could use sprinkles. I have these sugar crystals right here. I think the big 3 is just about done. You take it, you put one side into the sugar. Take the second petal, put it in the sugar and put it next to it, overlapping it slightly. That was really the wrong side. You'll see that the end marshmallow, you can't really get the sugar crystals to adhere because it's got cornstarch on it. That's how they keep the marshmallows separate. All right, so 5 slices of marshmallow. Put them on here so I can lift it up. And in the middle of the 5 marshmallow petals, you can either stick an M&M or a birthday candle. I'm going to put an M&M. Since I didn't get any birthday candles. And we have a little flower again. Okay, so I'm going to unmute you, ask Joan to unmute you so that you can ask any questions or say hello to each other. And thank you for paying such close attention.
Thank you, Marlene. I'm going to unspotlight you. Let's see, we can see everybody.
Okay, I'm going on to gallery view too.
Okay. So, by the way, everybody has to unmute themselves if they want to speak. But I want to thank Marlene. This was fantastic.
Amazing.
It was wonderful, and thank you, Marlene, for all the effort that you put in, clearly, besides this wonderful presentation.
Yes.
You did a lot of work, and your assistant also. We appreciate everything.
Yay for Jerry, yay for Jerry, yay.
I have one more thing to say, and is that I hope to see you all on September 30th, when it will be Elizabeth's chance to shine and get us to really in the mood for the party with some fantastic hats. So don't forget to be there.
Thanks, Marlene. You were dynamite.
Mutual admiration.
So I have the non-bakers question. This was fantastic. But the recipe that I am most interested in is the bagel recipe. Are we going to get a cookbook? Did I hear you say that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that is the one that I really want to see, because that's still on diets that I can think about.
Yeah, well, that recipe is simple. It's a cup of yogurt to a cup of self-rising flour.
Oh, good. That sounds like my speed.
And all of the decorate, you could put sesame or caraway, whatever kind of seed or onion on it. I happen to like everything on it, so that's the way I made them. And they're good. They're not like bakery bagels, but they are good. I'm trying to get everybody on gallery view.
But you put together a cookbook that we will be able to.
Yes.
Wonderful. You are wonderful.
I just have to, I would have sent it to Joan already, but I decided I would probably make some modifications after I saw how it went talking to people. I'm very comfortable in the kitchen, so that sometimes I take for granted what people know. And when I come across a glitch, then I want to let you know about it. Now, speaking of glitches, there is one, and that is these really, really good pumpkin pilots. Well, you can't see them. When I froze them, they did not freeze well. And so I had to come up with I guess I can bring them here. Yeah. The pumpkin pie mixture separated from the crust. I mean, the crust was very soft. So I put them back
Like
in
a
the oven.
custard.
I put them back in the oven to crisp them up. And now I'm going to put a dollop of whipped cream on top, which it needs anyway. And nobody will know how ugly they are.
They're not so ugly.
I just want to say the amount of preparation and sophistication of the various things Marlene presented was amazing. Where I come from, where I'm at, and always my two specialties are banana bread and oatmeal cookies. So this has been, a revelation. And I think I'm capable of slicing pound cake and loading it up with various degrees of frosting. Love that idea. Thank you.
Welcome. And you can use, any kind of canned frosting. This is not going back to bake from scratch. I mean, that's my default mode. I'd have to go out and pick the wheat, but
Right.
at our age, we've got to be a little bit more realistic about what groceries we can schlep home. I'm still in my original house, so I have a full pantry, but many of us are downsizing and we don't have 8 different kinds of sugar or 8 or 10 different bundt pans. So this is an acceptance of that fact. Again, this is your friend. This is your new best friend, the Betty Crocker sugar cookie mix. I don't work, but I do get royalties.
Oh, thank you. This is great.
So I appreciate your enthusiasm. And if you want the, I don't know whether Joan is going to send the recipe book to everybody, whether you want it or not. I guess she will. It's probably the easiest thing to do.
I'll send it to everybody, and it's online, so you can print it or save it or zap it. So
And
it's easy to do that.
the way the recipe is put together, it's on a Word program. If you just want the recipe for bagels, that's all you have to print out. You don't have to print out the whole 28, 40 pages. With table of contents and other information. I've also included at the back of the recipe book, the guide that I use for converting from cups and tablespoons, or mainly cups, into ounces and grams. For example, a cup of sugar weighs, it's 200 grams. So if you want to divide and have a third of a cup of sugar, it's easier than measuring a third of a cup of sugar. So that list is given to you because you will find it very useful if you start weighing your ingredients. And believe me, you save a ton of time by weighing instead of measuring. And you get a when you bake, accuracy is what counts.
Yeah.
Much more accurate weight, because a cup of flour weighs 5 ounces according to the standard measurement. But when you use different measuring cups, some cups are 4.5, some are 5 3/4, and that will change the results of your recipe. So most new recipes are written in grams and ounces.
British.
It doesn't matter if you're making bread, because that's a little bit more artisanal. But if you're making a cake or a pastry, you really want to have accurate measurements. And that's about all I have to say. Which was a lot.
Thank you, Marlene. It was
Wonderful.
It was my pleasure to be with you all. I wish we will visit again in some of our chat rooms that Pearl has been putting on. And we'll certainly visit on the 14th of October when we all are unofficially or officially 80. In full disclosure, I have already passed my 80th birthday. And in fact, if you saw the decorations on my table,
Ah,
it won't be as nice as what we're going to get from,
back at you.
but that's what my kids did for me about 2 months ago.
Brava, brava.
Happy birthday if yours is coming up soon, and I'll see you on the 14th.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Oh, you got Jerry,
Why?
because I'll leave the meeting and everybody.